This week on The Watchman, welcome to the Red Sea. This is one of the most vital waterways in the world. Israel, Egypt, Jordan, Saudi Arabia. It's a crossroads of the world's most chaotic region, the Middle East. And today, our good friend Elliot Chodoff, top military and security analyst, joins us on the boat to explain why the Red Sea is vital, not only for Israel's security, but for America's. What happens in the Middle East does not stay in the Middle East. Find out why today from the Red Sea, only right here on The Watchman. And welcome to The Watchman. We are here in Washington, D.C. at the Christians United for Israel Washington Summit. Now, right now, they're setting up for what's going to be a great event tonight. We've had some incredible speakers here at the summit. And next week here on The Watchman Show, you'll get a taste of it. Vice President Mike Pence, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, National Security Advisor John Bolton, U.S. Ambassador to Israel David Friedman, the one and only Pastor John Hagee, and many more. You'll see them all right here next week on The Watchman Show. But up first, this week, we're heading across the ocean to the land of Israel, where you usually see The Watchman for a very important show. One of the themes here at the CUFI Washington Summit has been the growing Iran threat, not just to Israel, but to America. So we picked the perfect person to break it down for us, our good friend, Elliot Chodoff. He is a major in the Israel Defense Forces Reserves and a world-renowned military, security, and strategic analyst. Elliot and I went out on a boat on the Red Sea, just south of Eilat, a great city in southern Israel. And folks, we saw a crossroads of the Middle East. So take a boat ride with us right now on the legendary Red Sea with Elliot Chodoff. Well, Elliot, we are here on the Red Sea.
Yes, we are.
At really what I would say one of the most critical crossroads of the Middle East. Set the scene for us right now about where we are and why it's so important.
Well, actually, it's not just a crossroads of the Middle East. We're in a crossroads of the world. We're at the northern end of the Gulf of Eilat, the Gulf of Aqaba by the Jordanian city that's up here, the port. If we continue down beyond that V that's formed by the two Gulfs, we're in the Red Sea, which empties out through Bab el-Mandeb, Yemen, Somalia, and out into the Indian Ocean, and from there to the Pacific.
All the hot spots.
All the hot spots, that's right. So essentially from here, whether it's via the Suez Canal in recent decades, centuries, or even earlier, from here up across to the ports on the Mediterranean, today Ashdod and Haifa, in earlier times Ashkelon, from there out to the Atlantic. So we're not only in a crossroads of the continents, we're also in a crossroads of the oceans.
And pretty amazing. Israel is right here, obviously, Elliot, the great resort town of Eilat. There's tourists, beautiful spot for vacation. But you have Eilat, you have Israel, but then right here, this is Egypt.
Yes.
This is Jordan, and over the horizon there is Saudi Arabia.
Yes.
Wow.
Right in the middle.
So the proximity, thankfully Israel obviously has peace treaties with Jordan and Egypt.
Yes.
Relations seem to be warming with Saudi Arabia.
Funny how the Iranians have made the Saudis realize that the Zionists aren't their enemy.
Yes, we'll get to that in a minute. Talk about some of the challenges, say, Israel faces in patrolling and monitoring the Red Sea.
Okay, well, first of all, since we have peace with our neighbors here, we have agreements with Jordan and Egypt, and again, Saudi Arabia busy with other problems, we don't have national threats on this body of water. In other words, there are no navies that threaten. I think it pays to remember that one of the issues that started the Six-Day War was Egyptian President Nasser's closing of the Straits of Tiran, which is the exit from the Gulf into the Red Sea. In other words, he blockaded a lot, not with a naval blockade, but with a gun blockade from the shore.
Right.
But we don't have that problem anymore. We do have a terrorist problem, and as you can see just looking around here, we're in the desert in every which way.
This is rugged terrain.
Which makes it happy hunting ground for terrorist organizations.
Yeah.
And we have Al-Qaeda here, we've had them for a long time, and all sorts of other jihadi. Today we say Al-Qaeda is kind of a catch-all phrase for all sorts of spin-offs and breakaways and that sort of thing. Yeah. So we've got all of that operating in Jordan, in Saudi Arabia, and now primarily
in Egypt here in Sinai. Elliot, I think of Al-Qaeda, I think of ISIS with a presence in Sinai. You and I were talking off camera about a terror attack in 2004. Taba, right here.
So right here we have the Taba Hilton. In Egypt. In 2004, there was a terrorist attack here. A car bomb was driven into the lobby, blew itself up. I was actually part of the rescue team then. I was down here. And a number of Israelis were killed, foreigners, non-Israelis were killed here as well. But this was a joint Al-Qaeda-Hamas operation back in 2004.
Interesting. And not so strange bedfellows.
Not strange bedfellows at all. And again, it gives us the evidence, the illustration. The Egyptians didn't want it. They didn't aid and abet it. But Sinai is a huge desert, very easy for terrorists to find.
And there's been missiles even fired from Sinai at Israel, at Eilat.
At Eilat, yes. Wow. So, I mean, again, this is Egypt. Sinai is right here. So when we think of, Sinai it's somewhere out there.
It's a Wild West kind of area there. Smugglers, the whole deal, terrorists, the whole 9 yards. And God forbid Jordan would descend ever into a stable now with King Abdullah, obviously, and a friend of the West and treaty with Israel. But
even Jordan, and with all due respect, they have a very good army, and they have great interest in maintaining stability. Their army is very small. The territory is very large. It borders on Saudi Arabia, Iraq, and Syria, and they can't control all their territory.
Talk about what Iran would like to do in the Red Sea.
In the Red Sea, Iran would like to choke it. And we've already seen the initial, call it the introduction to that story with the Houthi rebels in Yemen. A lot of people, I think, oh, there's a rebellion going on in Yemen. Who cares? Why should that make a difference to me? And a glance at the map will tell you why. Because the tip of Yemen is the shore of the entrance to the Red Sea, the southern entrance. And whoever controls those straits, the Bab el-Mandeb Straits, essentially controls the Suez Canal without having to be there. Because if you can't get in or out of the Red Sea, the Suez Canal becomes useless as a dead end.
So Iran's goal, and as America ramps up sanctions and pressure, rightfully so, Iran is threatening to choke off these vital waterways.
So Iran has two choke points, two critical choke points. One, Bab el-Mandeb, which is for global maritime shipping. And the Straits of Hormuz, of course, where just recently there were the unidentified anonymous attacks on the tankers, on the Saudi tankers, which of course we all know was done by Iran, but they'll deny it.
Of course.
And the West, always confusing legal with political issues, says, well, if we don't have evidence beyond a reasonable doubt, it doesn't work that way in the strategic world. But they'll deny it. They're investigating it.
They're on it.
But they're showing that they can choke those 2 points. Oil shipment out of the Gulf and general maritime shipping through the canal.
Iran has larger aspirations, Elliot, as you and I have talked about many times here on the show. They'd like to get out the Atlantic.
Yes, and that's why they have
flex global muscle.
That's why they have naval bases on the Mediterranean and Syria. It's one of the reasons, not the only one, that they're ramping up their presence in Syria so they can have access to those bases. Their interest is global, and once again, they have their anchor on the Indian Ocean. They want it now on the Mediterranean.
Which is why, and look, the Red Sea is in the neighborhood, obviously, vital waterway, which is why it's so vital for Israel, Egypt. Everyone has an interest. Jordan, Saudi Arabia, they all have an interest in the world in keeping this tame and safe here in the Red Sea.
Absolutely.
Elliot, thanks so much, my friend. Let's get back to some dry land right now. Much more coming up after the break from the Red Sea. It's the Watchman, only right here on TBN. Don't move.
From terrorists who would annihilate her with bombs and bullets, to so-called activists that would eliminate her with boycotts and sanctions, Israel's enemies are on the march. In Why Israel, You will learn how to be an active defender of the Jewish state, knowledgeable and powerful as you stand up for truth. You'll receive the biblical evidence proving Israel's special place in God's plan. Learn how his steadfast commitment to his people is a matter of fact, not opinion. From its miraculous rebirth as a modern state to the dangerous threats it presently faces, Israel's inspiring journey is laid out in this short booklet. Supporting Israel is a biblical mandate for all Christians. In Why Israel, you will discover why you should care about the Jewish state and what you can do to stand with God's chosen people.
We are here on the Red Sea at Eilat Naval Base. This is the southernmost tip of Israel, Jordan, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, just a stone's throw away. And we're here with the perfect man to talk about it all. Captain Gorin, thank you so much for joining us today on the Watchman Show. Hey, such a pivotal place here in Eilat at the naval base. You play a strong role here. Tell us why what you're doing is so important.
Right now I'm the commander of Snapir unit. Snapir, not sniper. If you translate it into Hebrew, it's like a fin. Okay. It's a unit that includes diving, for sweeping for mines and bombs, also maintenance. We have boarding teams. We inspect ships, merchant ships, that come into Eilat in our port. And also, I think the main job is the patrol boats, these ones.
Yeah, we're right here. We're right here on a dock on the Red Sea.
Yeah, aiding the routine security for our borders to be safe from infiltrations and terrorists.
Yeah, Captain, you have a tough job. It's a tough neighborhood, obviously. As we mentioned, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, a lot of ships coming through here. The Red Sea is obviously a very busy waterway. Tell us about some of the threats. And you mentioned, look, you counterterrorism, you're looking for mines. Tell us about some of the threats, I think of the terror threat in particular, that you guys have to look for here at Eilat Naval Base.
Terrorists are our main concern, mostly terror. We are less concerned about wars with other countries, as we have
state actors.
Yeah, we have peace agreement with Jordan, with Egypt, but we do have Sinai, which is in Egypt, and we know that is a place where a lot of terrorist cells.
I think of ISIS right there.
Yeah, ISIS, GAP, a lot of terrorists, and we have to be ready for infiltration. It can be above water, below water, it can be rockets, ships, scuba divers, any way the creativity and the imagination can take you.
Captain, the interesting thing about Eilat, this is a resort town. Look, this is where people come for vacation, for holiday, with their families, to lay on the beach, lay on the sea here, which unfortunately makes it a prime target for terrorists.
Yes, it is. We want to make our job as quiet as we can without interfering to civilians. But on the other hand, we have to be alert and ready because it's a very small bay, very short response time, and we have to be prepared for everything.
A few years ago, we had an incident. Some missiles were fired from Sinai at Eilat. You saw this in real time. Tell us what happened.
Yeah, actually, I was the captain of a patrol ship in the south part of Eilat, and we just saw the big flashes of the Iron Dome missiles intercepting the rockets. Yeah. Once you see this kind of thing happening, you have to be ready. You can maybe it's a distraction. Maybe now they plan something bigger to combine it with another act. So you have to be ready and prepared to respond quickly.
You were raised here in Eilat. You were born and raised here. So protecting a lot, it's kind of personal for you, right?
It's very rewarding to guard the borders where your family and friends live, to protect your hometown. We had actually another incident this late December when a swimmer from Jordan tried to infiltrate Israel. He actually crossed the borders. And we detected them with the infrared cameras that we have that sweep the bay. And the patrol ship that detected it started with the warning protocol, open fire procedure. It didn't stop, kept on swimming. It was Friday night, I was actually at home.
Shabbat.
Yeah, Shabbat. They notified me. I got quickly to here, to the base, to this dock. Went out on one of these patrol boats. Went out and arrested that guy, brought him here back to the beach for questioning. Yeah. And this is I think the most intimate experience you can have when...
You personally arrested him?
Yeah, with my team.
With your team, yeah.
We personally arrested him. But as I said, you go straight from your home into the base, out to the water, out to the sea, and arrest someone that tried to infiltrate to Israel. And as I said, you feel rewarded and proud.
Thanks again to Captain Tom Gorin and the brave soldiers of the Israel Defense Forces for taking the time with us in that great Israeli city of Eilat on the Red Sea. Well, coming up after the break, they call him the most dangerous man in the Middle East. Who is it? Stick around to find out.
With over 3.5 million members, Christians United for Israel is the largest pro-Israel organization in America. And for Zion's sake, we will not remain silent. We won't stand for the lies and political attacks that threaten Israel's safety and the future of the Jewish people in their God-given homeland. We want you to join us in this sacred movement.
The Jewish people are not alone. Christians United for Israel, I want to thank you for standing up for Israel. I want to thank you for standing up and being counted. May God bless you all. Thank you.
Israel needs you to take a stand. Join Christians United for Israel. Make your voice heard and be remembered as a defender of Israel, the apple of God's eye.
And welcome back to The Watchman. We are in Washington, D.C. right now. You see the team behind me setting up for the Christians United for Israel Washington Summit. On that stage behind me tonight will be some incredible speakers. You'll see them here on the show next week. But up first, we're heading back to Israel, to Jerusalem, with our good friend Avi Melamed, top Middle East and security analyst. When we want the latest developments on the Middle East and why it matters to you, we call on Avi. And this week, he breaks down the growing Iran and Hezbollah threats and tells us why an Iranian general may just be the most dangerous man in the Middle East. Take a look. Avi, when we talk about Iran and Hezbollah, Islamic Jihad, much of the chaos in this region, in Yemen, Syria, and elsewhere, one name keeps coming up. And that name is Qasem Soleimani.
Right.
Who is he, and why do some people call him the most dangerous man in the Middle East?
Qasem Soleimani is a very intriguing person. He's a major general within the Iranian Revolutionary Guards. And his former position, he is the commander of the Al-Quds force. Al-Quds is the Arab name for Jerusalem.
Yeah.
He's the commander of Al-Quds force. This is actually, if you would think about the Revolutionary Guard as the spearhead of the whole Mullah regime, the Al-Quds force is the pinpoint of that spearhead. And Al-Quds force, which is under the leadership of Soleimani, has one major mission, and that is to export or to spread the Islamic revolution in different parts of the region, particularly through the either establishing and nurturing of chains of proxies, and the person that holds this whole network of relationship is Major General Qasem Soleimani. Now he is very interesting because he's been around for the last almost 40 years. Wow. He was a young officer in the 80s.
So he's a true believer. Since the beginning of the revolution, he's been there in the vanguard. Yeah.
Definitely. He's a true believer. He is very well connected and enjoyed a lot of reputation and a lot of immunity within the system itself.
And he's seen in the region, by the way. He's been cited in Iraq and Syria. He moves around a bit.
He moves around all the time.
Yeah.
He moves around all the time, particularly in the area stretching from Lebanon all the way to Iran. He's very clever, he's very sophisticated. He acts on a very low profile, beyond the scenes, very influential. Some people are defining him as the real ruler of Iraq. Wow. Basically arguing that he walks around in Iraq.
In Iraq, not Iran. He's Iranian, but in Iraq, Iran's next door neighbor. He's taking advantage.
He walks around in Iraq and he acts like he's the owner of the home, he's the boss. Wow. He's very influential. He's involved, and particularly in the last years, with this whole Iranian expansion in different parts of the region. Whenever you find the Iranian proxies in the region, Hezbollah in Lebanon, Islamic Jihad in Palestine, in Gaza Strip, Hamas, Afghans, Shiite militias in Syria, Pakistani Shiite militias in Syria, Iraqi Shiite militias, you will find the fingerprints of Qasem Soleimani.
Wow. Folks, he's a very dangerous man. That's a name to remember, Qasem Soleimani. Avi, a dangerous man, dangerous developments, but you make it all so easy to understand, my friend. Thank you, as always, for joining us here on The Watchman. We'll see you again soon. Hopefully, we'll be out in the field on one of these borders again real soon.
As always, my pleasure, my friend.
Our pleasure. Thank you, Avi. Coming up, the Iranian regime's war against America and what you need to know. That's after the break. Don't move.
Today, we are seeing the rise of an old enemy wearing a new mask. Once, anti-Semitism was displayed by those in white hoods or wearing the twisted cross of the swastika. But today, this old hatred hides in plain sight. Only a decade ago, anti-Semites were shunned and despised. Now, this appalling bigotry has a platform on Twitter and is applauded in the public square. CUFI was built for such a time as this. We will not let this darkness dim our light, for Christians are a light unto the world, and Israel is a light unto the nations. Join us. Don't curse the darkness. Shine the light.
And welcome back to The Watchman. We are wrapping up from right here in Washington, D.C. as preparations are underway for our 14th annual Christians United for Israel Washington Summit. You can see the team setting up behind us. And next week, right here on The Watchman, you will see Vice President Mike Pence, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, National Security Advisor John Bolton, the one and only Pastor John Hagee, and many more special guests right here on The Watchman from the Christians United for Israel Washington Summit. If you're not here this year, you need to be here next year in 2020. Visit cufi.org, that's cufi.org, to register right now. Well, one of the major themes running through the summit this year by speaker after speaker, including the Vice President, was the growing Iran threat, not only to Israel and to the Middle East, but to America. Folks, let's take a look at the past few months and what has transpired. The Trump administration, thankfully, has increased sanctions against that Iranian regime. The Iranian regime is feeling the bite. They're feeling the pinch, and they're starting to lash out. They've attacked shipping in the Persian Gulf region. They have shot down a U.S. drone. This is an attack against an American interest. An American drone was shot down by the Iranian regime. And not only that, they have announced that they are increasing their enriched uranium levels. That means, folks, that they are trying to enrich enough uranium to develop a nuclear bomb. Oh, and by the way, if you're in the West, the Iranian regime is also developing intercontinental ballistic missiles, ICBMs, that could be mounted with a nuclear warhead and, yes, travel across oceans and continents. Here's the good news. Number one, God Almighty still sits on the throne. And number two, we now have, at Christians United for Israel, 7.1 million on fire, committed, passionate followers of Jesus who are standing up for Israel, standing up for America, and for all that is good and true. If you want to be on the cutting edge of what's going on in the world right now, if you want to be informed, because the Bible says, my people perish for lack of knowledge, then this is where you want to be. Join us here at Christians United for Israel, for Zion's sake, for America's sake, and for such a time as this. You see the phone number, the website there on your screen. Call or click and join us today. It is a movement, folks, and it is a mighty movement of God. Well, we'll see you back here next week at the Kufi Summit. These seats will be filled. That stage will be occupied by some incredible speakers, including the Vice President of the United States, Mike Pence. You will not want to miss it. That's next week on The Watchman. In the meantime, thanks for joining us this week. God bless you. And remember, never hold your peace.